everyone, Dr. Natalie Frost here again with some more tips for you and your family. First of all, I want to teach everyone something called progressive muscle relaxation. And this is, perhaps you still have too much energy and so you're not quite in the mood to slow down and do deep breathing. This might be a good place for you to start. So first of all, you're going to start with your feet and just wiggle your toes around, wiggle, 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 and then relax. And then I want you to move up to your feet. So rotate your ankles, rotate, and then relax. Now, we're gonna start to move up to our legs. So I want you to stretch them out. Stretch, stretch, stretch. Kick, 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 and relax. Now start to move up to your stomach. Kind of squeeze your tummy muscles in. Squeeze, 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 and relax. Now we're gonna start to move up to our hands. So I want you to pretend that you're holding lemons and squeeze the lemonade out. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze as tight as you can, and then relax, okay? Now, we're gonna move up and just kind of rotate our head side to side, and then relax. So you can do this as many times as you need to. Just start from your toes and work all the way up to your head. And remember all those tiny little muscles, just squeeze them and then relax. For you parents and adults out there, as things start to open up more and more, you may want to start to reflect on what COVID-19 and these times have meant for you. For some of you, you may have gone through some pretty historic world events already, whether it's been experiencing wars, famines, the moon landing, or Y2K, or the invention of computers. There are many different things that we have experienced in our lives, and this is another significant event. You may want to write down what it's meant for you, or perhaps collect some photos so that you can then pass on your stories and share them with other generations. For little kids, you might want to do this as well. Kind of keep a little journal about all the fun activities you've been doing at home and what it's like not to be at school. Because who knows, things might look different this time around next year. Okay, take care everyone. Bye.
Time. What's the number 1 rule?
Be kind.
What's the number 2 rule?
Be kinder.
What's the number 1 rule?
Be kind.
What's the number 2 rule?
Be kinder.
So, what's your name?
Ava?
Ava, did you watch the video last week with Miss Viv?
Yeah?
And did you hear the clues?
Yeah?
And the clue was a teacher was asked a question, and the first rule was easy, but the second rule might not be so easy. And did you guess the verse to win ice cream?
Yes?
Oh, tell me what it is. So what was the first rule?
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment.
And the second rule?
Love your neighbors as yourself. Matthew 22:37.
Yes, you are the winner. What are the rules, Ava?
Be kind and be kinder.
Yes, you are the winner of the ice cream. So, now I was gonna try and get you, hold that there. I was gonna try and get you a bigger one, but that was the biggest one they had. So, I thought you might want to share these with your friends. There's a whole bag of Smarties. Yes, you are the winner.
She got that part.
Good play for that. When I was a new Christian, you're always impacted by those first stories. The ones that you open your eyes and ears and you go, people did what? And I can remember being in church, and I do believe it was my father-in-law, Vic, who's going to speak shortly, and he talked about people that would go off into the mission field, and instead of suitcases, they had coffins to take their belongings in. And as I've just listened to his story, it's incredibly powerful. But as a Christian at the time, I thought that's what it meant to follow Jesus. I still believe that's what it means to follow Jesus. But we don't. We're very comfortable. We're very privileged. And we seem to think that other people will do the work for us, or if we supply money to a certain charity, they'll just get on with that, that stuff because they're better at it than us. Well, the reality is that our next door neighbour, to the person we meet at the coffee shop, to the people we work with, are all a mission field, not targets, but people that we can love and bless and show them a bit of who God is. Not in a judgmental way, not in a way that says we're better than you, but in a reality of we're family, we're God's people, we're all God's children. So we're going to listen to Vic, and it's an incredible story of 50 plus years of a man that heard somebody speaking to God, worshipping, and it changed his life forever.
I start by saying that I've spent the past 56 years, and I'm still working in different nations, bringing the help that families need to especially those living in rural areas, where people have no clean water and have no access to medical help, no education, and no skills training. This means often it's their first contact with a Christian and the love and the power and life-changing message of Jesus Christ. This setting shapes the way that we do mission, often resulting in the first school, the first medical setup and help, and the first church, and the start of permanent change for the families of that region. Today, I want to take you back to the time when my life had the first seed sown into it that would shape the person that I am now and what I do in the lives of other people in the nations. I was born into an ordinary, working-class British home in 1940, into a World War II Christian home that always had an open door for people. It meant that we had several uncles and aunties that constantly came and went from the home. Some of these were American soldiers based in a building on our housing estate that would later become my school. One of those was Uncle Ralph. We remembered him because he gave us chewing gum as young children, and it would mean that we soon learned with other children that we would go to the American soldiers wherever we saw one, and we would always have one thing we asked them: have you got any gum, chum? And they would laugh, and sometimes they would just take a piece out of their mouths of the gum that they were chewing, thinking we would never take that, but we would never refuse it. And so it was always a very important time of the day when we ever saw an American soldier walking down the road towards us. Another uncle was Uncle Emmett. He was unique because he had a full set of gold teeth, and we would do things to get him to smile for us, because looking at those gold teeth was never boring. We would want him to smile endlessly, and so he was very patient with us as young kids. There were other men who came into our home for short periods and longer periods, and it became a normal way of life, but they were unique. They wore grey jackets, and there was a yellow star on those grey jackets. I now know that they were Jewish prisoners of war. There were people who were recovering from sicknesses, unmarried mothers with babies, a dinner table open to other children with no food. And there were pioneer WEC missionaries, World Evangelization Crusade missionaries, on their way to Africa and India. And when they returned, we would want them always to tell us the stories about the lions and the tigers and the snakes and what we regarded as great adventures, and loved to see the slideshows that they bought of their pictures from where they worked. 7 years of age for me was a very important time. Important because 1947, it was one of the toughest winters in Great Britain, and the snow was piled deep outside of our house and on our road. 7 years old was when I had a birthday, when Uncle Ralph sent a packet of chewing gum to us, and I was able to cut it up and give it to my friends that I invited to my party. I was definitely flavor of the month for quite a while at school. I had this cool American soldier uncle and had a supply of chewing gum. But 7 years old was also that first sewing that sticks in my memory. At 7 years old, I saw a young man kneeling in the middle of the crowded small front room of our council house, with his hands and his head raised to the ceiling and tears streaming down his face, singing at the top of his voice, "Let me burn out for you, dear Lord, burn and wear out for you. Don't let me rust or my life be a failure, my God, to you. Use me and all I have, dear Lord, and get me so close to you that I feel the throb of the great heart of God, and let me burn out for you." He was singing this, and he would leave later that morning. After that night, he would leave, and he would go to the mission field. These words were tattooed into my memory and never forgotten, and have shaped my motivation and the work I do in the nations for these 59 years. I could not see myself back then, or as I grew older, as a lifetime missionary, but wanted to do what they did. Things were stirred in me, and I didn't understand then, just very simply, that someday I would be working in a context with people that we begin to talk about today. Then in 1962, something unique happened to the churches in Great Britain. Parachurch landed. Parachurch happened in the shape of Operation Mobilization. It landed in the UK and in Europe. Summer teams of young people from UK and European churches were recruited to be transported daily to towns and villages in the back of old 3-ton trucks with no money, and going out to meet people daily, door to door or on the streets, wherever it was, selling Christian books from the bag that an OMer always carried. And then, after selling those books to them, you could eat. And it was in this context, in a very basic setting, where you learn to meet and get on with different nationalities thrown together in the back of a truck, and learning how differences were hard to get used to, and each of us wanting different foods. But you learned very quickly that whatever you ran into for food, you would eat it. You learned how to go hungry. You learned how to sleep on a floor and simply eat whatever was on offer. Today, you can find hundreds of thousands of XOMers in every nation on earth, and they're serving Jesus still. Many of those lead significant Christian and missionary movements that they, in turn, were led to start or be part of from their early discipling and experiences of Operation Mobilization. I met and married my wife in 1965. We returned to England in March 1966, and that November we sailed to India. We sailed there with George Verwer, the founder of OM, and his family, to join others that were driving overland from Europe, and there together we laid the foundations of what would become OM India for decades to come. As I have often been asked, when you thought of going to India, how did you know it was the right thing to do? I can tell you with hand on heart the following. We had no angelic visitations or mighty calls or waiting for a vision. We had no burdens, passions, or compassion for the lost that I had to wait to get before I would feel it was right to go to a people who I'd never met and who were of a different culture. And I will return to this at some later point we may visit together to give a biblical context to this as it shapes our understanding of what is needed to get involved with people or to be in mission. I will say this, simply one thing has always been very clear to me. Jesus' final instruction that's familiar to us and familiar to anyone who's heard the term, the Great Commission. It's something that is a phrase that's not a biblical phrase, but it does give us a context for understanding the final command of Jesus. And I've understood this one thing. He instructed those he trained to go to the people of the world in every country. When Jesus said go, it was always connected to work with people. Except once he said go, and that time it was go get me a donkey. But we wake up every day to facing that simple word go and connect with the people in our work, in our place, in our neighborhoods, on buses, planes and trains, where we study, where we train. It doesn't matter, there's always people wherever we are. Jesus' daily work was people. That's as I've always described it. We talk about his ministry and his calling and his anointing, but Jesus worked. In John 7, it says that Jesus said this. He said, "My Father is working even until now, and so am I." And on this day in June 2020, those words are as relevant as if it was the first time he said them. My Father is always at work, and you may as well put in brackets, with people until now. And I myself am always working with people until now. If Jesus' work is people, our work is people. Doesn't matter where we are or where we go. Keep it simple. With Jesus, the key to being effective with people was very simply this. Stay childlike. Keep it simple. Matthew 18:3. And I'll give you the kingdom. There's no waiting for when or where. That was never in our mind. Just the certainty that there was a command to obey, go. And when it was possible to go for a summer, for a day, for a weekend, for a week, for a year, or maybe for life, then seize it, seize the opportunity. In the modern day context of this, so many of my friends have ended up becoming English language teachers in Muslim nations, in China, and in many, many parts of the world as the door to connecting with the people and living amongst and making lasting friendships in the context of living in that country. It was not a case of should we do it, it was much more. Here's an opportunity, and why wouldn't we do it? Why would you not do it? At 26 years of age, with a 1-year-old baby, it didn't cross our minds that we needed some kind of special permission to get this whole thing done. And I want to leave this with you. A very simple but true story of someone called Walter Gowans, 26 years old. He was a Canadian, and with two other friends, they went to what was called then the missionary graveyard. We know it today as Nigeria, to the slave Gold Coast of West Africa in 1893. Only 1 year later, all three of them separated from one another. He lay dying with malaria. One of them had already died. The other would not be too long, like himself, dying. Many like these three men, these three friends. They waved goodbye to their families, and they became known as the one-way missionaries. Why were they called the one-way missionaries? And there were hundreds like them. They bought one-way tickets to the mission field. Instead of suitcases, they packed their few earthly belongings into coffins. Can you imagine? Into coffins. And they knew, that's why they packed their belongings in coffins. They knew that what was ahead of them as they went to the country of their choice. They knew they could be returned within 6 months to their families in that coffin, having died from the diseases or the circumstances, or they would be killed by the people that they went to live and work amongst. And this is what he wrote as he lay dying. He said, writing to his mother on August the 9th, 1894, I am approaching my end, which has often lately seemed very near, but just now seems very much imminent. And I want to write while I have the power to do it. Well, glory to God. He's enabled me to make a hard fight for the Sudan. And although it may seem like a total defeat, it is not. We shall have the victory, and that will come very speedily to us. I have no regrets for undertaking this venture, and in this manner of life, I believe it has not been thrown away. My only regret is for you, my dear mother. For your sake, I would have chosen to live. What a mother you've been. It seems that I appreciate you now more than ever I did. Oh, how often I have thought while lying here of your love and how I have longed to see you again in the flesh. Don't mourn for me, my darling, dearest mother. If the suffering was great, remember, it is all over now. I think of the glory I am enjoying and rejoice that your boy was permitted to have a hand in the redemption of the Sudan. There was nothing to show for the seeds he sowed into the lives of those he met and talked and worked with in a short 365 days. But today you can go to Nigeria, to some of the biggest churches across the south of Nigeria. And 800 miles north in the city of Kaduna, where we are based and work from, into the Muslims of the north of Nigeria up to Kano and the border up there with Niger. There are hundreds more churches, but it is into such a rural setting that we have worked for over 20 years that you will find scattered everywhere the remnants of the Sudan Interior Mission that emerged from such as he, and other kinds of organizations called ECWA, the mission to the students. And everywhere you go, you find that it is the seeds that were sown in us. And so my final word today is simply a question. Are you ready to carry your coffin into your next appointment to work with people for Jesus? God bless you. I hope we meet again soon.
In the second and third century, we have historical accounts of epidemics and plagues that swept through the Roman Empire. And they're incredible accounts and stories of what Christians did in those times. When most people were running for the hills because if a city had a disease, you had to get out of the city, there was no way to fix it. There was no cures, there was no way to fix it. And Christians that had heard about Jesus, that had seen the actions of Jesus, stayed in those cities. And with all the religions, it's stated that the Christians would actually see their lives with less value than the people they were trying to help, because they understood that the Jesus that they followed gave his life serving. It's a phenomenal account because it says that people turned from their own religions to Christianity because they'd never seen anything like it before. Because the way that these people treated, cared, and looked after and even loved was something that was unusual in the time. And as Christians today, when this pandemic finishes, there should be accounts of us. There should be written accounts of the things that we are changing to assist this world.
Grander earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice. Seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from miry God. Through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well with me.
Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea.
Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you. It is well. It is well It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. And through it all, my eyes are on you. And through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me.
Now that is an impacting story. That is a person that has given their life, their time, and sacrificed quite a lot. What we're hearing about is the movement of agape love, that unconditional love, that love that surpasses us, and it's more about them. I'm just looking at a book at the moment, and the title of it is, Would the Real Christian Please Stand Up? And we know what that comes from. But how do you feel when you hear that story about people walking off into the mission field, the one-way ticket? The world at the end of COVID-19, if there is an end to it, the world is changing. We have seen people become kinder than we've ever seen them be before. We've seen people being thoughtful for the people around them. And in the last few weeks, we've seen things just fall apart at the seams. And we see the nature of countries, of people. And it's not always great to look at. At the end of this time period, the church will have to rise up. It will have to do something that says that God's character is more than just preaching and telling people they're wrong or they need to do this or that. The church needs to actually take part in its community, in the life of people around him. And it needs to actually show that God is good and God has got something more to give than I believe the church has given in quite a while. But looking back in history and looking at Vic's story, we see how going can impact tens, hundreds, and even thousands of people. So I ask you this, will the real Christian please stand up?